Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. The week is almost over. It is Thursday. We only have two more songs to get through for the Lo-Fi theme week. Today we're going to look at one from a group called Weatherday. The song is called My Sputnik Sweetheart. As usual, I'll be using Bandcamp rather than YouTube on this one because with lo-fi music, it tends to work better with Bandcamp's compression, or lack of compression maybe, than YouTube's terrible compression. Alright, let's get into this.
Yourself lose control. One, two more.
Alright, so we're in 3/4.
Bones in view. Then some time to come in. My Sputnik Sweetheart sighs. Don't want to meet your friends. Hold me down. Learn to eat like nothing's left.
It's very compressed, but it almost feels inversely mixed, which is very interesting to my ears.
Who is your influence?
What I mean by that is usually I hear stuff pan to left or right or center, and here I hear pan left to right or behind me. It's very interesting. I like the human element in this so far as well. There's been one or two notes that come in a bit late, and they're just left in there. I love that.
My wrist is built on fear. When did you stop to ask if
There's something very haunting going on the left side. I'm not sure if it's a vocalization or if it is a synth of some sort. I'm pretty sure it was a vocalization now. harsh cut between these two ideas. Very interesting hearing a very punk idea without the drums having that forefront mix style, being mixed in the forefront like they typically are. A lot of emotion being delivered through the vocals, but it pairs very well with what's being done in the music as well. That's the second time that our high point has transitioned nicely into our lower point, but then we've had a stark transition into our next idea. Let's listen one another and remember why we don't do. Clipping a choir. This is it's a decision that I respect, but is not something I'm enjoying. Almost sounds a little detuned or maybe microtonal. Definitely feels just a hair sharp to me. way that the guitar line is juxtaposing the vocal line here. How those vocalizations almost have sort of a flutiness to them. Of the vocalizations are acting as a drone here, even as we moved into this new section. Definitely a bit outside of my typical listening, but there are some really neat ideas going on in here. We're going to get into that. So, just to start this off, I do think it's really interesting that if somebody had suggested me this song 2 years ago when I started this channel, almost 2 years ago, first of all, they would have been from the future, because I think this was a 2020 track. And, oh, nope, this was available when I started my channel. This would have been out for a few months. But I think one of my main criticisms, or I don't really want to say criticism, but one of my main topics probably would have been how there's a lot of really solid ideas in here that the low production gets in the way of being expressed. I might have even said being expressed properly. It is interesting what 2 years of exploring new types of music and the ways that people can utilize what I used to think were bad ideas in interesting new ways. With that said, my ears are still not quite attuned to what's going on here, but I'm going to do my best to speak about it in the most neutral way I can while still highlighting and speaking positively of the strong parts of the song. With that said, the lo-fi quality is still very strange to me. I can understand its choice in some songs. We've checked out, I think it was yesterday's track. Yes, Sun Devoured Earth's Eternal Silence. That is a song where I felt that the lo-fi element kind of worked. I've also talked about how the lo-fi element can give the song a bit of a timeless feeling by kind of making it feel like it's from an older era, even if some of the musical ideas are newer or maybe fit in with more modern standards of song composition or whatever. But here, this type of lo-fi seems to expressly utilize clipping and compression for stylistic intent. And it's just very new to my ears. The entire song is built on this idea of making everything sound as muddied and distant as possible. And that is just the opposite of what I tend to listen to. So I think I'm going to leave the production comments there. I want to focus. I'm going to try to keep my focus on the music from here on out. But I do want to preface that that the production is very alien to me. It's very different, and it did affect some of my listening because the purpose of it seemed to be to muddy things up and to make it sound distant, which does not work well for my listening style, which is orchestral listening, which is where I listen into each individual element and see what they're doing on their own before kind of surveying that, bringing everything together and seeing how it all works as a whole. Not being able to hear everything very clearly and cleanly disrupts some of my listening process. So yeah, I think we're done with the production. We're going to move on into some of the musical ideas here. There is a real rawness in the music, and I mean that overall. There are several sections in here where there's vocal wavers, vocal cracks, where there is the perception of poor air control. Again, I'm not saying the vocalist has bad air control. It could very well have been done on purpose, which would show expert air control, to create a specific feeling of desperation, which I think was the reason that it was utilized the one or two times that it was. There are guitar parts and bass parts that come in. Maybe a note is a hair late or a hair early. There's a lot of these elements of human imperfection in the song. And as I mentioned, I love that. I really enjoy when songs don't feel robotic. I think there's definitely some styles of music that benefit from that, especially once we get into super fast stuff. I don't know, just death metal, I guess. Maybe it's black metal. Just constant strumming, constant double bass kicks. When you have everybody playing 16th notes constantly, you want that to be clear and precise, otherwise it's going to get muddy. So robotic precision is required once you start playing, especially in unison at that speed. But with stuff like this that kind of moves into rock or indie, I definitely enjoy some of those elements. It's one of the few things I talk about this all the time. It's one of the things I love about jazz, and I bring jazz up a lot. But jazz is a live music. Yes, you can watch recordings, and yes, a lot of those recordings still capture a lot of the magic. But to me, jazz is a live art form because one, subtle mistakes are, to me, a part of jazz, and a lot of productions don't always have that. And two, of course, live improvised solos. You watch the same recording over and over, you get one solo, but you go see the same guy at a club, 5 nights a week, and every night you're going to get a different solo. So that that element of surprise, of not knowing what's going to happen. This could be, he could flub the section in, the main meat of the song, or he can play a few notes out of line with the key in the solo, and you don't really know if it was intentional or not, but it was fun. Those little elements are just, to me, it's the heart of music. It's the humanity of music. Really precise music is good. All right, I'm not going. I talk about super clean production all the time. I do enjoy music that is expertly and precisely created. But when I want to feel music, this right here, the small human imperfections that are left in, just, I love it. I know it's not for everybody, especially since a lot of modern music has conditioned us to expect perfection. I mean, pop music doesn't even allow you to have the sound of a breath. It just blows my mind. You can't hear the singer breathing in most pop songs. I'm sorry. I almost went on a tangent there. uh, the imperfections on this, I'm really fond of. I think it takes, first of all, a little bit of bravery, especially given what people expect from music, that precision and perfection. But also just a bit of vulnerability. You're telling people that you're not perfect. You're not going to play every note perfectly every time, and you allow that to be showcased. And then it's human. We are humans. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. And I like having that element in art. Art can be clean, art can also be messy. And this is a messy song. Not in a bad way, in a good way. Um, so that part, right off the bat, that was right in the first. I think we had one of those in like the first minute, and that was the first one I noticed, and I heard one a little later. Um, So I thought that's just really cool. I appreciate that. Um, then we have the song structure as a whole, which is another thing that stood out to me. This is very much a rhapsody told in 3 or 4 parts, with each of those parts kind of being divided into a high and a low, which is interesting. There is a pattern to this. We start with a singular idea, we build up to it, we have a slow burn, and then we almost immediately come back down. It's not a slow down, a slow release. What is the opposite of a slow burn? Anyways, it's a fast coming back down, but it is a smooth coming back down. It's not abrupt. It's usually many of the layers we've added being removed, usually through a fade of some sort. Maybe the guitars are holding a note out or something like that and letting it fade naturally. And then we return to a baseline structure, and then there's a harsh transition into the next idea. And that actually gets repeated, I think, every time. It's very interesting to see the patterns in this song. Um, so it's really interesting to look at this song as a series of highs and lows between 4 sections, which gives it a bit of a rhapsody feel. There is no recurring concepts. I don't think I heard anything related to any sort of chorus idea. I don't think I heard any riffs being repeated. It is a series of 4 sections. The pattern I also think is interesting as well, with the gradual rising layering followed by the quick release into the next section. I think it's really interesting to provide a sort of a roadmap, especially after the second time. We're moving into the third section and you start to see the pattern. You can kind of get a feel for where we're going. which is important because it contrasts a lot of the more chaotic elements in the song. The contrast helps because it provides a bit of an area where you can be grounded in, where you can feel like the song isn't as chaotic, and it helps, one, at least for me, it helps me understand the chaos by having a center point to compare it to, but it also helps elevate the chaos because it makes it even more chaotic up against this idea of pattern of recurring order throughout the core, the essence of the song. Now let's get into some individual ideas. This song has some very cool individual ideas in it that I don't think are necessarily what people are going to hear on the first time. They may subconsciously hear it, but a lot of it is hidden inside of the production. In a sense that the production, I think, it's interesting. I don't think I've ever said this before. The production is the center stage of the song, at least to me. And maybe that's just because it's so different. Maybe once I listened to a lot of this style of lo-fi stuff and the production, I can kind of push the production out of the way and dig in a little bit more. Maybe it won't be as prominent. But to me, the production is the space that the singer would be in a pop song. The core focus, what seems to be the spotlighted aspect of the song. So, at least from that perspective, the production kind of being the core idea here, at least for me, as a listener, I found out a lot of the really cool musical stuff was hidden by it. It was kind of underneath the surface. However, once you start listening to a lot of the ideas, because there are a lot of layered concepts going on here. Like I said, there's several slow burns in here. The slow burns tend to exist within layers and volume dynamics. Those are the two things that tend to get built on with these slow burns. And once we get to the height of each slow burn, there's actually a lot of really cool rhythmic and melodic ideas that are playing off of and against each other that create an interesting, once again, combination of order and chaos. There are some really nice harmonies in here, but those harmonies are sometimes butted up against things that are rhythmically dissonant in a way that the rhythms don't come together to create fun rhythms, but in order to add more chaos to what's going on. Now, the interesting thing with the rhythms is that some of these instruments are so loud that they're clipping or they have the extra compression on them, and some of the rhythmic aspects tend to feel more rhythmic because of the crunch on top of the tones. So you get these harsh attacks, but then you also get that static crackling on top of it as well. And it's just sometimes the notes sound no different than the crackle, and the crackle kind of becomes the tone. So you get the rhythmic elements in the crackle meshed in with maybe, the eighth notes that you're actually playing. And it's very interesting how at least my brain begins to kind of mesh these two together, where I can't hear the difference between the instrument's timbre and the crackle of the compression and clipping on top of it. So much of the tone has been removed. The characteristic has been removed from the clipping and the sound effects that it is becoming one with the effects. It's very interesting. And I guess kind of in a sense, I'm coming around to this lo-fi production. I think I've said a couple of things so far that have been in support for it working better in the track than a cleaner one. Dang, I lost my train of thought there. Oh, yeah, contrast and harmony, order and chaos. There's so much of that in here. Like I said, you have the rhythmic stuff going on, you have harmonies, The slow burns tend to start with some more harmonious stuff, and then as more and more layers get added, sometimes instruments and lines start stepping on each other's toes. Sometimes there's some rhythmic overlap that doesn't work too well. And it's interesting how every section starts fairly harmoniously. Not to be confused with harmony, some of these actually do begin with a bit of tension in the note relationships, but the singularity of having one idea, maybe one idea, and a drum pattern starts off with order. And we add more and more layers, and each layer brings about chaos. I also think it's interesting how throughout the entire song, each section grows more and more chaotic until we reach that pinnacle at the end of the vocalist basically screaming. Some of these screams, this is the part where some of the perceived poor air control come in, and some cracked voices. The voice is also the most drowned out in this section, with so many parts being played around it that it's almost difficult to hear the vocals. We also have vocalizations doing harmonized oohs or ahs or something, pan left. We have two guitars at least, I think. We have the drums. The drums are the most flooded as far as compression goes that I think I've heard to date. Those, especially the crash cymbals, are just. It's to a point where I don't even hear the cymbal really. I just hear the crackling, and it's very surreal to me. And again, this could be my experience with this style of music. But the whole song ends up feeling very dreamy and distant. Um, and I think the culmination of all of this chaos at the end, it's very cohesive. As I mentioned, each of these singular ideas build up, they start from order to chaos, but also the song as a whole moves into a more chaotic realm, starting from the most ordered full sound. I'm talking about the peaks of these slow burns. If you look at the most complex parts of each section, they go from order to chaos as the song goes on as well. So very cool synergy there with some of that. Dang, I just had something. I lost it. There's so there's so much going on in here. Um, yeah, I completely lost that train of thought. I think the last thing that I want to touch on is uh, the introduction. The introduction of the song, I would say, is a bit of a thesis statement of what we're in store for. The very beginning of the song let me know exactly what was going on. We have a simple guitar riff. The first bar or so is fairly harmonious. It has a nice flow to it. The second half is where the compression and distortion and clipping and anything else that's really altering the tone, color, and timbre of the guitar, I think hit a point that to me is cringe inducing. And I mean that in the way of like nails on a chalkboard, where it's not cringe from some shared idea of embarrassment, but just like a sound that I actively do not enjoy. And the guitar begins to hit some higher notes that, combined with all the effects on it, create a sort of screeching element to it before returning back to the more palatable idea of the beginning of the riff. And it tells me everything I need to know about the song. At least for my position as a listener, there's going to be elements that I find more palatable. There's going to be elements that I really do not enjoy as a listener. We're going to bounce back and forth between them, and there's going to be heavy audio distortion or degradation or destruction, however you want to look at that, to create a sound that is very new to my ears at least, but a very destructive sound overall. We're really decomposing what these notes and sounds were when they were played into a different sound now. One thing I do want to touch on real quick before we go, because I think I'm just about at the end of this little analysis here, um, is rhythmic, meter, concepts like that. Uh, I it's interesting because at the beginning I was having a difficult time figuring it out before the drums came in, and I think I finally landed on the 3/4. But what's interesting is that as we moved on into the song, I could still feel the 3/4, but it felt like we were also doing a halftime in some sections, getting like a 6/8 going with almost like a triplet feel on some of the eighth notes. And this idea of threes being packed away in every bit of the song is really interesting. There are 4 sections to the song, if I remember correctly. But this idea of 3 continues to recur in the rhythms all throughout the song. And I'm not quite sure what it means. It could mean nothing. The composer may just really enjoy writing in 3/4, or that you put eighth notes in a 3/4 setting, you're going to get 6 of them. Well, you can divide that up into 3 sets of 2 or 2 sets of 3, and maybe they just chose 2 sets of 3. So it felt more like 6/8, but it really wasn't a conscious decision. It was just, well, I have 2 choices, and I picked one of them. And I could just be reading into that a little bit. I don't know, but I think if I were to listen to this again, checking out for more 3s would be one of the things that I looked for in the music. All right, I think those are all my thoughts on Weatherday's My Sputnik Sweetheart. I think I touched on everything I wanted to. We got the humanity in it, the production, contrast, the chaos versus order ideas, the pattern in the song structure. Yeah, I think I touched on everything there. This is a very interesting song, at least for me. Like I said at the beginning, there's a lot of really interesting and cool ideas going on in here that, at least to my ears, are very muddied because of the production style. And I would like to hear a version that might be a little cleaner in the production, just so I could hear the music, completely understanding that it changes the entire tone and atmosphere of the song. It would basically be just for me to hear the musicality of it, because there is some really strong music in here, and I like the way some of these lines come together to create the atmospheres that they do. I just have a really hard time hearing what exactly is happening in the music to create these atmospheres. But this is where you guys come in, though. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this, if you enjoyed it or not. Any sort of context or information about the track or about Weatherday, go ahead and let me know. Above the comments section, there's a description box. In there is a link for Linktree, which is a very nifty resource. It's a menu with links for everything related to the channel. You can follow me on Twitter, support me through Patreon, join the Discord community, can even submit a special selection. All of that is in there. We have one more video coming up. It's already out. Actually came out 10 minutes ago. It'll be a special selection. And then tomorrow, we'll be looking at the final lo-fi track, and I'll be checking out a band who has emailed me asking me to look at their music specifically. All right. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.